Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 3rd of November of 2024. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Kyiv because the Russians continue hunting and attacking and destroying the Ukrainian military and engineering facilities above the capital of Ukraine. Today we got another batch of videos of how the Russian drones were flying above Kyiv without any problems and without any resistance. Furthermore, without any work of any air defense systems. For example, this is another video of how the Russian drone was flying. The people on the ground were saying that, take a look, this is Russian drone. And also when they were making this video, they were discussing that there is no air defense at all, and most likely the situation in this military sector is very bad in the armed forces of Ukraine. Today we also got a very important statement that probably it explains this current situation. For example, today we got report from some Rada deputy, from Ukraine Parliament deputy Marina Bezugla. She stated that due to a critical shortage of personnel, the Ukrainian General Staff is redistributing medics, airfield brigades, artillery crews, and even Patriot air defense missile systems cover forces to infantry units. You know, this is a very important piece of news because there are several ways how to explain the situation. First of all, what that comes, for example, to my mind is that Ukrainians are planning to surrender. You know that if Ukraine plans to surrender, the first requirements that Ukraine will face in this case from the NATO and from the Western countries, to destroy evidences, to destroy everything that can bring the Russian additional intelligence or information. And everybody understand that if Ukraine is going to surrender, the most valuable units of Ukraine is those units that during the special military operation had the opportunity and chances to work, let's say, with the HIMARS missile systems, with Patriot missile systems, for example, with F-16s. And of course, NATO countries and the United States of America will never allow these units to be taken and be captured by the Russians, because these people can provide significantly important information to Russia. So that's why the destruction of these crews, of these high-tech experienced crews, means that can mean that Ukraine is planning to surrender, and now they try to make a cleanup for the Western countries. Let's wait what is going to be next. Maybe these statements of Deputy of Verkhovna Rada is just speculations and wishful thinkings. Let's wait. Obviously, sooner or later we will understand everything. Now let's move to the line of combat contact, and first we're going to talk about the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue advancing and manage to take additional control over additional state and say different settlements and villages. But today I would like to take a look at this direction from a bit another angle to understand how the situation was developing for the previous previous few weeks, starting of the 20th of October. So this is the situation on the ground on the 20th of October of 2024. The Russians just took control over the village by the name of Ugledar, and basically this is the beginning, this is the line of beginning of Russian greatest South Donetsk offensive operation. The Russians just managed to take under complete control the South Donbas coal mine number 3. The Russians just managed to cut the road TO 524 between the village of Konstantinovka and Ugledar itself. The Russians just took under control the village of Ostra, and the Russians just took under control the artillery pocket by the name of Nivoyska artillery pocket. The Russians just finished the fight for the eastern part of Tsukurina, and the battle for Selidovo was ahead. So this is the line, this is the beginning of the 20th of October. Now let's take a look on the situation and how the three group of forces, the group of forces east, the group of forces south, and the group of forces center were working in this direction, and how the battle for the southern Pokrovsk was taking place and was developing. So this is how the situation was developing. Every single day the Russians were able to take more and more territories, more and more strongholds, more and more positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. This period was very difficult difficult. During this period of time, the Russians, according to different military experts, managed to take under control up to 818 square kilometers under their complete control. The Russians managed to take under control the significant number of villages, settlements, and most likely the Russians are about to create the biggest cauldron ever since the beginning of the special military operation. So this is how the situation was developing, and now let's discuss everything in details. As for the current updates, the Russians managed to take under complete control the village of Maksymivka. This information was provided us by the Russian forces, by the 36th Separate Motor Rifle Brigade. In this video we can see the Russian flag that was waving in the most northern part of the settlement. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map, and most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in Russian favor. Now let's talk about very important updates that are coming from the line from the villages of Yelizavetovka, Ilinka, Antonovka, and Katerinovka. Today we have just one video. Probably this video is archived probably several days ago. Some sources are saying that this video was made on the 28th of October, and in this video we can see a Russian tank that was heading towards the settlement of Yelizavetovka under very heavy artillery fire from the Ukrainian side. This video is very important because we don't know for sure what exactly is happening and where exactly the Russians were stopped or slowed down. But today we got very important statements from some pro-Russian resources that the Russians are saying that as a result of clashes, the village of Yelizavetovka was completely captured by the Russians. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that the Russians are about to finish the battle for Antonovka, and the Russians are saying that they're about to begin the battle for the village of Vilinka. So most likely during the next 2-3 days we're gonna start receiving first updates from the settlement of Vilinka, which is very important because the Russians are getting closer and closer to the Ukrainians in the settlement of Kurakhova. Now let's talk about the northern direction. Today we have several changes on the ground according to pro-Ukrainian mappers and according to pro-Russian mappers. Now it is always interesting to compare the pro-Russian updates and pro-Ukraine updates, and as I understand, the truth is always somewhere in the middle. As for the pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians just moved to the west from Vovchinka, but the most southwestern part of the settlement still remains under complete Ukraine control. But as for pro-Russian mappers, they show of course completely different picture, and the pro-Russian resources reported that today the Russian units managed to enter the eastern part of the village by the name of Ilinka. So currently the clashes are taking place for this area, and if this information is correct, most likely the Ukrainians that are currently located in the western part of Vovchinka and in the village of Stepanovka lost their possibilities to escape the cauldron, and another group of Ukrainian forces were caught in cauldron. We're not talking about thousands of Ukrainians, but probably up to 100 of Ukrainians were caught in cauldron in the territory of Stepanovka. So let's wait for additional updates. If this information is correct, most likely during the next several days we're going to receive first geolocations or first reports from pro-Russian military experts that will give us these updates. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the city of Selydove. If you remember, during the previous 3-4 days we've been talking a lot about the significant number of FPV drone attacks exactly on the line between the village of Selydove and let's call it the village of Toritsk. Today we got additional batch of videos, and as you can see, just for 4 days we got up to 20 events, 20 videos that were geolocated exactly in this line. And today we got of course another batch of videos of the type as of how the Russians Sudzha crew was attacking the Ukrainian vehicles along the main supply roads in this area. And we always were saying about one thing: if we see Russian drones, that means that the Russians are going to move exactly in this direction. And you know, the Ukrainians gave us another evidence that we were correct and we were right. Today the Ukrainian sources published the video of how the Ukrainians were trying to destroy another Russian attack with the use of a significant number of armored vehicles, personal carriers and tanks. The Russians were attacking along the railways, as we were talking about, in the direction of the village Grigorivka and Petrivka. Ukrainians of the 36th Marine Brigade were responsible for defense of this direction, and probably the Ukrainians managed to slow down the Russians or maybe even to stop them. Anyway, this is just the beginning of offensive. During the next few days we're going to receive more and more updates. And as for this video, we have made some changes on map. So this is the situation on the ground by the end of the 2nd of November. This is the situation by the end of the 3rd of November. The Russians are moving and the Russians will move further. Now let's talk about the Chasiv Yar direction, because the situation here became critical for the Ukrainians. Today some Russian sources reported that the Russians, as a result of clashes, managed to secure the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass canal from the village of Azaryanovka till the village of Grigorovka. Everything into the east of this canal, of this line, was captured or recaptured by the Russians, and the Russians are not planning to stop. And according to information we have, most likely during the next several days we're going to start receiving updates of Russian progress in the direction of the villages like Stupachki, Pritechina, Alexandra Shultina and Bela Gora. Let's stay tuned to see what is going to be next, but this might be the beginning of the Konstantinovka offensive operation with the purpose to encircle the Ukrainians in the city of Toritsk, where the Russians also during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions in the southeastern part of the Zabalka district of the city of Toritsk itself. The Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were FPV droning the Russians on the territory of this settlement. Lots of episodes, lots of attacks from the Ukrainian side, and these several episodes confirm additional Russian progress. Now let's talk about the Seversk direction, where the Russians resumed their offensive activities, and today the Ukrainian sources published the video of how the Russians were trying to attack the Ukrainian positions in the direction of Vyimka and the village of Ivana Daryevka. The Russians were using the significant number of forces, and the Ukrainians of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade were attacking the Russians with artillery, with tanks, with FPV drones and so on. So you know that this is a very interesting operation that the Russians were trying to conduct. I will explain to you why. This Russian offensive operation started not today, not yesterday. This was something like long-scale prepared operation from the Russian side. For example, this operation started several days ago in the village of Donetsk. So on the 31st of October, we got the video of multiple Iskander strikes on the village of Donetsk. Later we got reports that this was the temporary deployment point of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade, and as a result of this, several strikes with multiple strike with 4 Iskander missiles, the Russians destroyed up to 4 vehicles, 1 warehouse and up to 80 soldiers of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade. Right after this attack, the Russians on the 1st of November, so yesterday, the Russians began bombing and attacking the forces and the positions of this 10th Mountain Assault Brigade to the north of Vyimka and to the north of Ivana Daryevka. In this video, we can see the artillery preparation and how the Russians were tossed flamethrowering the Ukrainian positions with this flamethrower system. And on the 2nd of November and the 3rd of November, the Russians began their full-scale offensive. So as you can see, that was not just attack, that was a combination of different attacks in this direction. The 10th Mountain Assault Brigade published us the videos of their victories, but of course they haven't published us the videos of their losses. Most likely the losses also took place. Now let's talk about the southern Kupiansk direction, where the Russians continue advancing in the direction of Yampolovka and Terny. Today we got another batch of videos that improves Russian positions in the village of Terny itself. In this video we can see several Ukrainian FPV drone attacks on the Russian vehicles. Some of them were destroyed, and we managed to geolocate the edge positions of these vehicles. One of the vehicles was destroyed here, another one was destroyed here. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map in the northern part of Terny in Russian favor. As for different mappers, today we got report that the Russians managed to get a little bit closer to the village of Yampolovka and entered the forest by by the name of gloves. Now let's talk about the Kupiansk direction, because the Russians are advancing both in the southern, in the central Kupiansk direction and in the northern Kupiansk direction. The Russians managed to maintain their positions between the village of Krugliakovka and the village of Lazovo by taking several trenches and several strongholds of the armored forces of Ukraine in this area. As you can see, the progress, the dynamic in this area is very fast. The Russians are moving, the Russians are pushing, and the Ukrainians are retreating under Russian pressure. As for the southern part of the northern Kupiansk direction, just yesterday the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported about complete control of Pershatravneva. Today different mappers have maintained the line of combat contact between the village of Pershatravneva itself and Raigorodka. So we see that the Russians are moving from the north in the southern direction. The same story we can see in Sinkovka in the northern part of the northern Kupiansk. In this area the Russians also are advancing, but this time the Russians are moving in the direction of central part of Petropavlovka. Now let's talk about the Sudzha direction. We have lots of updates. The Russians are about to finish regrouping, and I believe that tomorrow on the 4th of November the Russians will begin their full-scale offensive operation with the purpose to cut this territory into many pieces and then to handle with every single one separately. Today we got additional videos of how the Russians were bombing Martinovka. This is very important strategical position to control the city of Sudzha itself. I'm not sure whether the Russians are going to attack Sudzha tomorrow, but first they need to get the outskirts of the settlement by taking under control the settlements around. As for the northern part, during the day we got the significant number of attacks, Toslam Towers attacks, FAB attacks, and so on. I'll remind you that according to the President of Russian Federation Putin, up to 2,000 soldiers of the armored forces of Ukraine were caught in cauldron in this area, and now the Russians began the active phase of the cleanup operation of these territories. So let's wait what is going to be next. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.